The John T. Huston and Dr. John D. Brumbaugh Nature Center was established in 1986. It was generously donated from Dr. Brumbaugh to the University of Mount Union in memory of his late grandfather and original owner of the land, John Huston. The purpose of the Nature Center is to educate students and the community of the benefits of nature and the importance in our society. This is the story of the life of the Huston Brumbaugh family, which has previously gone untold. And like with any good story, I will start at the beginning. And I mean the very beginning. The first Europeans came to what would become known as Alliance in 1809 and began settling the land. A man by the name of John Grant is believed to have built the first structure in the area. In the surrounding area, Native American tribes such as the Delaware and the Shawnee had a strong presence. The area was settled by Americans moving west, as it was quickly realized to be a great farming land.
Well, the area itself is really good for farming because, and not just around the Nature Center, but all of Northeast Ohio, glaciers descended upon this place during the last ice age, and when they retreated, they left behind a lot of soil that had been pulled up as the glaciers went back. So the soil is really dark and rich there. Plus, most of Northeast Ohio had been forests, and so there was a lot of tree fall and that sort of thing that adds to the fertility of the soil. The land itself, although we are on a high point in Ohio, has a lot of areas that were flat enough to cut the trees down and farm it, and so it was also flat enough to farm, as it were.
When John Huston first came to the area, he likely bought the land from the government, a common practice in the 1860s, as many others purchased plots of land in the surrounding area as well. When he first settled the land, Huston and his wife Catherine built a cabin. This was not to be their permanent home, but a temporary shelter to live while their home was being constructed. In addition to the home being built, they also built a barn. While Huston was busy beginning his new life in Alliance, the country was in the midst of a bloody civil war, one that would leave approximately 640,000 soldiers dead.
The Civil War in Alliance was a very interesting period. We actually had a camp on the north end of town. If you go on North Union Avenue and just past Ely Street, between the area where Harrison and Wayne Street, between Union and about Garfield, there was actually a training camp there for the military. I believe it was called Camp Ford, and the soldiers would train there. We had many, many men from the area who served in the Civil War, were very proud to join volunteer infantries and serve the area.
Ohio contributed around 340,000 soldiers, and every 84 of 1,000 would never make it home. But why didn't Huston fight in the war?
John Huston himself probably didn't serve in the Civil War. He would have been the head of the household. He would have been necessary to keep the farm going together. And depending on his age during the Civil War, which I'm not 100% sure of, it might have just been more practical for him to stay and do the farming and let the farm hands, the younger boys, the neighbors, go off and do it. You had to keep the farms going.
Just 2 years earlier, in 1858, Mount Union received its charter as a college. Now that Huston's barn was built, he was able to go about farming the land. He farmed around 100 acres, where he grew produce. He also had animals that grazed on the property. In the year 1860, John and Catherine Huston had their first child, a girl named Mary. All stories suggest that Mary was a peculiar character.
She never got married. She had a reputation, from what I've been told, I never met her, she died long before I came, of being a unique personality. She apparently would take in boarders to help work on the farm, and some of them would describe that she had a strong personality. Which probably was necessary for a single woman trying to operate a farm in the 1930s and 40s, when times were probably pretty tough, recovering from the Depression. There's a lot of mystery and a lot of speculation about Mary, but I suspect some of it's based on truth.
In 1889, while the Huston family farmed their land, Alliance was incorporated as a city. When John Huston passed away in 1932 at the age of 95, Mary was to receive her father's farm. Mary lived on the property, managing the farm, until her death. Being single her entire life, she never had children. When she died, there were no obvious heirs to the family property. Fortunately, Tamsin had married and had a child, John D. Brumbaugh. John was born in 1898 and had one sister, Mary Zoe, who passed away tragically and young at the age of 25, just 1 year after her mother, Tamsin. John Brumbaugh was born into an eventful time period, one of new technology, scientific advancement, and unfortunately, war. John was attending college when nations collided and World War I began. John joined the campaign in 1918, but was honorably discharged soon after, likely because the war had ended. After the war, which would leave about 116,708 Americans dead, about 6,500 of which were from Ohio, John continued receiving an education. John completed his education just in time for World War II. John enlisted again and served as a medic in the war. The extent of his role within the war is unknown.
I know very little about his time in the service. He didn't talk a lot about it. As a medical doctor, he was commissioned as an officer. I don't know what he did as a military person.
After the war, John would continue his medical practice in Akron, Ohio. He would continue to do so for about 50 years, making him the oldest practicing physician in Ohio. Back at the Huston farm, upon Mary's death, John was given the land. While he did not have any interest in farming the land, he did understand its importance to his family's history. He was also involved in a number of other endeavors. John was a member of the board that began the Akron Children's Zoo. In his free time, John enjoyed traveling.
One area that Dr. Brumbaugh didn't cut corners on was travel. He and his wife loved to travel. He had visited perhaps as many as 100 different countries during his lifetime, and has a small plaque that he hung on his office wall in commemoration of the club that you can join if you've visited that many countries. He felt that, in talking to me, that you can always learn a lot by visiting other cultures, by hearing other languages, by seeing historic sites and understanding how the world that he lived in at that time and that we live in now came to be based on the places that you visit. And also what we can learn from cultures that do things differently than we do, that might be something that maybe enlighten us in how we live.
As John grew older, he began to realize that he needed to find something to do with his estate after he passed away. After making what he believed to be sufficient arrangements for his family, he figured out what he would do with the family farm.
The Nature Center was established in 1986, in December, when Dr. Brumbaugh donated the farm to the university, then Mount Union College. And in that deed, he specified that it was to be maintained as a wildlife area and for education purposes.
Mount Union College received the Huston farm and the land associated with it. While still alive, John ensured that his grandfather's legacy was preserved, as well as making sure the Nature Center was as he envisioned it.
As Dr. Brumbaugh was still alive at the time of the gift, which is somewhat unusual for people who give large gifts, we were able to visit with Dr. Brumbaugh frequently. He came out and told us stories about the farm that he'd heard from his grandfather. And he also helped us establish sort of a style and a goal and a mission. And that was very useful to us, to be able to respect the donor's wishes. And it was very helpful that our view and what we thought we could do were very much aligned with Dr. Brumbaugh.
The benefits of the John T. Huston and Dr. John D. Brumbaugh Nature Center are displayed across not only the students attending the University of Mount Union, but also the surrounding community. With education programs for local schools, hiking trails, and classrooms for the university, there are countless benefits.
The Nature Center is a pretty small area when you consider how much land there is in Stark County, in Ohio, in North America. And when we think about Ohio having been 95% forested at the time that the first European settlers came in the 1700s, really, and now we're about 30%, having dropped all the way down to 10% at one point. The relic that the Nature Center is and its small postage stamp size on the landscape have created a unique environment, and it allows for us to see a lot of organisms that wouldn't be there if we weren't there.